Hello everyone, welcome to Zura's Workshop, which is a new YouTube channel that focuses on Lord of the Rings the Living Card Game. Which is probably already obvious to you since you clicked on the video, and this is a first video from what hopefully will be a full-grown series sometimes. And the series is how good is a card. What are we going to be doing is we're going to take some cards, probably some more odd ones, out of the bin there, and we'll try to figure out what we can do with it in what hopefully will be a short and concise matter. And the formula is a pretty simple 3 steps. The first step being taking a look at the card itself. We'll take a look at how it fits into the card pool. Does it represent an archetype? Is it an universal card? What's its floor? What's the ceiling? With the floor being like the least possible value you can get out of the card, the worst case scenario, and the ceiling being the most value you can possibly get out of the card. It's like the Magic the Gathering term. What are other similar cards we can compare it to? So we don't judge it in a void in which there are no other cards, because like it's a mistake to judge cards without taking a look at other similar cards. And lastly, we'll take a look at pros and cons of the card, which probably vary a lot, since cards have a lot of different uses. Some cards want to do something that the other cards really do not want to, so sometimes what could be a pro of one card could be a con of the other. So like you will always need to take what card are we judging in consideration, what does it want to do. The second step in our formula is that we will take a look at a deck I've built to showcase the card. And it will be a deck that fits 2 criteria. The first criteria being that it makes a good enough use of the card to justify spending a card slot for it. What do I mean by that? For example, you could probably take like something like Systems the One deck, like some of the most popular and the strongest archetypes in the game, like the Elrond archetype, and just slap any sort of card into it. And it could be deceiving probably, because you could probably get a lot of value out of something that's a pretty bad card just because all the other cards in your deck are so good that they made up the tempo, for example, that was lost by playing the card you just played. But because your deck was so good, you felt like this card was good. Like the example of such a deck could such a card could probably be Grave Cairn, which is one of the worst cards in the game, and it's a pretty relevant card to today's topic, which is Last Stand, but I will get to that later. And if you played Grave Cairn in Vilya deck, even if you never played it, you probably wouldn't felt like it was annoying you too much. But if you played Grave Cairn in some more balanced deck that actually tried to make use of it, you could probably end up pretty disappointed because, well, it's not a good card, right? But you could play bad cards in good decks. That's not what we are going to be doing. We are going to play cards in decks that they fit into. And the second criteria that the card needs to fit, and the deck that I will be building needs to fit, that I'm not going to be bending the whole game just in order to get value out of the card. And what I mean by that is that we're going to be aiming for some more realistic scenarios in which we actually use the card rather than creating some extreme circumstances in which it will thrive the most, as doing so usually won't tell us how good the card actually is in game. If you devote all of your deck to a single card that you wouldn't normally build around, you will get some worst results. And in what will be the final step, we'll take a look at the relation from a game, and we'll be showcasing the highlights in which we have used, or maybe not used if it was totally worthless, the card that is the subject of the video. You may ask, why have I decided to show just the highlights rather than a complete playthrough like the most people that do Lord of the Rings the Living Card Game content on YouTube do? And it ties into my whole idea for the series. I wanted to do something quick to watch that you can digest pretty fast, something that will hopefully be informative without taking too much of your time. And sadly, Lord of the Rings the Living Card Game playthroughs do not particularly lend themselves to a spectacular video format, as probably most of you guys don't have 1.5 hours to spare to watch me play a scenario when our goal is to rate a card. However, without a playthrough section, it could be hard for me to get an accurate opinion on the card, so I feel like this is something that is worth including both for me and for you, the viewers. And before we get into the actual video, just a quick disclaimer: while I have been playing this game for the longest times, like since the Mirkwood cycle, I do not consider myself to be a perfect player. For example, the Wilds of Rovanian cycle is still something of an uncharted territory for me, and it's pretty likely that I will be missing out on some synergies sometimes, and when you see it happening, hit me up in the comments so I will know for the next time. And now, let's get into the video. So, we're finally here. Last Stand was an easy pick for the first video for me, as it's a card that I almost never see played anywhere, and it's one I very often wanted to play just to figure it out, but it doesn't really fit into anything I'm playing, and I've been putting it off for later. So what does it do? It's a zero-cost tactics event that reads: response: after a warrior character is destroyed while defending against an enemy attack, deal damage to the attacking enemy equal to that character's printed attack value. So on the right I have put some major themes that this card represents, and like some of my first thoughts on the actual card, on in which decks it could be used. So those themes are direct damage, which has been with us since the good old corset days. The second theme is sacrifice, which is like spread around all the spheres. It's been with us since forever, but it's mostly associated with Rohan. But there are some other good and very bad cards, like the good one that you can see here is Horn of Gondor, which is probably... it used to be a lot better before the errata, but it's still pretty good in the scenario we are describing right now. And some absolutely terrible ones like To the Aerie. I also have a few more ones, but I will get to them later. And the final theme with this card is something that the developers tried to do with the Dream Chaser and the Haradrim cycle, so the trait matters thing, and by that I don't mean the Noldor, Dwarves, Hobbit or any of those traits. It's just Warrior, Scout, all the professions. And this event requires you to be playing Warriors, which is something not a lot of events encourage to do. But now that we've got the themes out of the way, there is we need to address the elephant in the room. So there is some big puzzle to be solved when it comes to its actual utility. It being, you probably don't want your warrior characters to be dying. There are 3 scenarios in which this card can be used. The first scenario being you have sacrificed your attacking warrior in an attack. It happens sometimes, but you don't want it to happen. The second scenario being your defending warrior has died in an attack, probably due to badly timed shadow effect or something like that, which is also something you really don't want to see happening, because defense is more important in this game than attack. And the third scenario being you have champ blocked an enemy with a minor warrior and you want some extra value. This is a very narrow scenario, but it's the only one in which it is useful. Because the thing is, the first 2 scenarios are not ones that we want to see in our games. And if we want emergency buttons, we should probably invest in ways to keep our characters alive, rather than try to reap benefits when things start to crash and do not go our way. So the only scenario in which it seems plausible to me to play Last Stand is scenario number 3, in which we champ block. But usually champ blocking is done with characters with low to no attack, with token champ blocker being Squire of the Citadel, who isn't even a warrior, which is a theme for most champ blockers in fact. So we are stuck in wanting to champ block with high attack warriors, but not having any available, and when we have them, we want them to stick around to fuel our attack power. And actually I feel like this is the case usually, except in one scenario, which is Prince Imrahil deck, and it's a hero released in the same cycle as Last Stand, so it seems pretty obvious that they are kinda meant to play together. And his ability allows us to pay 1 resource to search top 5 cards of our deck for a warrior, a noble, or a Gondor ally during the combat phase. what it means is that we can possibly send everyone questing, and for easier early game enemies we can just pay for a chump blocker, which can even be a 4-cost Legolas in this case. We can block with them, die, as they would go away at the end of the phase anyway, so there is no benefit in keeping them around, and harm and hopefully kill the enemy for some extra value using last stand. It costs 0, so with good card advantage it will naturally fit into our strategy with Prince Imrahil. But before we move on to the deck, which is part 2 of the video, here are some quick comparisons I promised earlier in the introduction. The first, very obvious comparison is to compare it to Grave Cairn. Grave Cairn costs 1, but it's in Sphere with most resources, which means it's not really that hard to get 1 resource in leadership. It doesn't require a warrior, but it does require another character for us to actually use the attack power of the character that died. And also it will need to go through defense, so it's pretty much a pass, even if it's more universal because you don't need a warrior. But the fact that you don't have to jump through the hoops that last stand represents doesn't mean it's a better card. It's very bad. Also, I hate Grave Cairn, so I would never use it. The second card I wanted to compare it to is Goblin Cleaver. And Goblin Cleaver with setup, when you can kill an enemy, is probably the superior card here. However, Last Stand has the advantage of working from turn 1 with Prince Imrahil with no setup other than having Last Stand in hand and 1 resource on Prince Imrahil. And when you have Last Stand in hand, you don't need anything else, which is very good. And Last Stand also has the possibility of dealing 3 damage or more, but usually 3, to non-orc enemies. And the big advantage of Goblin Cleaver is that you can actually kill enemies before they get to trigger their shadow effects. Because with our Last Stand, they will still attack, and if the shadow effect is something like discard an attachment you control, you will discard an attachment you control. With Goblin Cleaver, if you can kill them before they attack, well, you don't have to care about the shadow effect. So it's probably better to use Goblin Cleaver if you have the deck that Goblin Cleaver is more suited for. And now I will move on to some synergies. I will just there's a lot of synergies and a lot of comparisons, but I've just decided to showcase 2 synergies, 2 comparisons, so it doesn't last forever. So the first synergy is Valiant Sacrifice. Not going to talk about it much, but if you're going to be dying anyway, maybe reap even more value out of it. I don't know. It's probably a smart thing to do if you're running both leadership and Prince Imrahil and Last Stand. It just seems like a natural fit for this card. And the second synergy is Rallying Cry. It's very costly in my opinion for something that could be considered like a word of command for warrior allies. But in leadership you can pull it off. It's pretty costly, but it enables you to get your Prince Imrahil ally back into your hand instead of back into your deck, and it makes it more reliable to find rare 1-offs and 2-offs that you maybe couldn't draw normally. It has the small benefit of the Valor action, so maybe you can work with that, but it requires a pretty dedicated deck. And we're not going to be using leadership in the deck we have built, spoilers. So now that I've teased the deck, let's move on to the deck itself. And here it is, the deck we will be using Last Stand in. I wanted a solo deck that can get us some card draw and resources, as the combo of Prince Imrahil with Last Stand kind of wants both to be accelerated, because Last Stand wastes a card and his ability needs constant resources to work. I was naturally inclined to put Arwen in, as her ability with Elven Light can give us both, and because I wanted another tactics hero, so I can hardcast, which is play them from our hand for actual resources, our costly tactics ally, and I naturally went for Arwen Aragorn build. With this deck we have 7 starting willpower, which is always a good threshold, with safety of chump blockers Imrahil generates. We have Horn of Gondor for resources and Elven Light for economy. We have some attachments like Light of Valinor, which allows us to get better value out of Tale of Tinuviel. Also Elrond's Council synergizes well with it. We have a pretty solid ally lineup with lots of 1-offs for Imrahil to find. And because our card draw is not too spectacular, I decided we won't be doubling up on too many uniques. One odd thing you may notice are Squires of the Citadel. They are basically a free champ blocker with Imrahil's skill, because they give you back a resource when they die. And if you happen to draw them, just discard them for R1, because you can't play them. They are a leadership card. And you won't miss them after you discard them. We have some classic questers like Edir Swordsman and good high attack low HP warriors like Marksman of Lorien, who will be our primary last stand candidate. Those are the guys that will be dying and dealing 3 damage while going away. Galadon Archer is also a good alternative. They both have some enters play effects, which means you're basically getting double the value. And we'll be mulliganing hard for the economy cards, mostly for draw, for Horn of Gondor, for our Ancient Matom, Gather Information. Those are the cards we want to see. And sadly, as I said before, I didn't really want to be playing third copies of some very crucial cards, because they will be dead draw later on, and it can lose us a game if we get too many dead draws. And I think that's the deck out of the way, and we can get into the gameplay. So here it is, the gameplay itself. I've only decided to showcase 4 rounds of the game, but the game lasted a bit more than that. But I just decided to show the relevant or the more interesting bits, and I've sped it up a bit, so we don't spend like 20 minutes here. Only to get some solid take on how last stand works. So this is the first round. As you can see, we actually managed to do some progress, which is good, because if you don't, you lose the quest. This is the quest that if there is no progress on the main quest at the end of the round, you lose. So that's why the first round is pretty much the most important. We got pretty lucky with Prince Imrahil, we got Legolas, and we managed to kill the sentry, and they are pretty annoying. But as you will be able to see, the sentries didn't let us go, they kept coming, and now it's like the 3rd round, I think. Yeah, it's the 3rd round. And we again have 2 more sentries in play, which is annoying. They both have archery, and archery is pretty deadly against Tactic Spirit deck, because we don't really have any healing. So, and our allies aren't particularly tanky as well, so we need to tank it on our heroes. And in the late game, as you will be able to see, we will be very close to dying with our heroes because of the archery in the quest. Here we will actually be able to see the magic happen. We really needed to kill the sentry, and we blocked with Azain, summoned by Imrahil, and we play last stand, we kill him. So this was actually a zero cost deal with archery enemy who can attack for 4 potentially. So pretty high value out of the card. Not sure if this is its ceiling, but it was pretty high on, in my opinion. Now we're into the late game. For most of the game, I was just revealing more of the archers, which I had to deal with slowly but surely. We took a bit more damage, and now we revealed yet another one, so we'll have to be dealing with them as well. And this time, actually, last stand will be the thing that won us the game. Which wasn't really anything I was expecting. I was expecting just to get a little bit of value, but the thing that won us this game was that if I didn't kill the archery enemies, they would kill me the next round, because I already had to start discarding allies. As you maybe had seen, it's pretty sped up, so you maybe not, but I had to discard one of the marksmen to archery. And now, one of our marksmen defended against the southern archer. She died, but we used double last stand to deal 6 damage to him, and we got rid of the archery enemy, and that's how we survived. So double last stand is a pretty legit thing. I must admit that when I was starting to make the video, I wasn't really considering double last stand, but it's definitely a lot better card when you get 2 in hand at once. Then it's pretty much guaranteed to kill most enemies. So pretty good. Here, this is the last stage. I think we had a pretty lucky reveal for once, because it was a treachery that whiffed, which isn't doesn't happen too often. And here you can witness double Tale of Tinuviel with Elrond's Council, which is a very, very powerful combination, which allows us to basically double the willpower that Aragorn and Arwen would be able to commit on the round. So we made 11 progress in one round in a quest that's pretty much all about speed. So we got the tempo covered by the Tale of Tinuviel here. And here will be the last round, which I found interesting to show because we revealed 3 more enemies and we would have died if not, if we haven't won the quest then. So, very close game, and actually last stand won us the game. So now let's move on to the verdict. So what is the Council's verdict on the scale of 1 to 6, where 6 is not really attainable except for the select few? We'll probably know. From the gameplay I've learned that it can allow you to come back when your board starts falling behind in a Prince Imrahil deck. It does also seem profitable to stack copies of it, to use at once to defeat higher difficulty enemies. Sadly, in Imrahil deck you also run the risk of not hitting a warrior at all in your top 5 cards, which has actually happened in my playthrough, making Last Stand kind of randomness reliant. So, how good is Last Stand? Turns out it's pretty good. I would rate it 3 out of 6, which means you can put it in your decks without much shame. Thank you all for staying so far. It was my first real YouTube experience, so the video was obviously not as polished as it could, but it actually took me forever to put together, so I hope you enjoyed the video for what it was, and that you got something out of it. If you have any suggestions about less played cards that I could cover next, hit me up in the comment section. And see you guys in the next one.